Danny Smith, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll ask you questions round robin, you just answer them. Okay, so the first question, when budgets are tight, there are no easy choices in making budget reductions. How would you approach making difficult choices such as staff reductions, facility closures, and elimination of education programs?
That is the $1,000,000 question, no pun intended, sorry. I think what it all comes down to is trying to make sure that you're aligning all of your decisions with your district goals. Whatever you have as the strategic plan for the district, whatever you have as your school goals and your district goals, those are the types of things that you're going to use to guide those decisions. So if, there's some kind of wonderful, professional development that would really be nice to have, or that piece of equipment that would really be nice to have, I think the first question is, does it align with our district goals? And then another question is it going to directly benefit our students? Because that's the other piece of it is it going to benefit our students, and if so, how many? Because we want something that obviously we're going to kind of get the most bang for our buck, right? If we have limited resources, we're going to want to use them wisely. So that's what I would use as our district goals, probably as sort of the guiding light on that.
What strategies would you support and or implement to maintain enrollment trends?
Well, enrollment is a big problem, and I won't say problem, actually, maybe let me rephrase that. It's a big issue, right? Everybody is struggling to keep their enrollment, and we have so many reasons that enrollment is declining nowadays, and probably, we've seen the most of that since COVID. Stevensville, which is where I'm at right now, we deal with the same issues, but it's for different reasons. We lose a lot to people up and down the valley through athletics. I suspect it might be some of the same causes in Plains, but maybe not. Some of it's the homeschooling. Some people they're making the choice to homeschool their kids, or they're doing online education. So I think that when it comes to enrollment, I think that we have to just continue to publicize all the good things that are happening in the school. We have to really emphasize the strengths of being here in person. And I think part of that is just really not even part of it. I think the big piece of that is getting the story out about what's happening in the schools. Because honestly, you get negative publicity at the drop of a hat, right? But sometimes those good things that are happening every day, those don't hit the paper, those don't hit social media. And so I think it's a big deal to make sure that those things are actually getting out there as well. I know that that's a big push that we have right now in Stevensville, is to make sure that on a regular basis, those things are on our website, those things are on social media, and so people know what's actually happening in the school and in the district. So I think that's a big part of it. But I think ultimately the goal is that we want our kids to get across the finish line. And, we do have some things in place, such as, I know Harmony is an online school right now that still counts as our school. So I know sometimes kids are choosing to go that route. And I think ultimately what we want is our kids to get across the finish line. We want them to get their diploma. We want them to stay in school. And so trying to seek out those ways that perhaps those kids can do that, and it might be a little bit of creative movement or structuring of their day, but I think it's important for us to be able to meet our kids where they're at, because having the traditional school day in its traditional form sometimes isn't what's going to be the way our kids are successful. So I think trying to figure out what is going to make our kids successful is going to be our ultimate goal. But obviously, yes, we want to hang on to our kids. We want them to stay here. But maybe that can look a lot of different ways.
How would you go about attracting and retaining qualified staff members to commit to Plains?
That's difficult, right? In rural areas that are a little bit farther from places that are seen of kind of the hubs, right, of activity. I think that, tapping into some of those local resources that we have, you know, the grow your own teacher programs, I think are really important. I think that partnering with our closest university, well, I won't even say closest university, doesn't necessarily have to be, but our state universities. I know that I worked at the U of M in the teacher education program for 8 years, and I know that I partnered with a lot of rural schools. They would come and they would say, we're looking for a math teacher, do you have anybody coming out of the program? And so I would try to funnel those teachers in that direction. So I think that partnering with them, I know that there are apprenticeship programs that the universities are doing right now that they are trying to send and get teachers out to rural places. I think high school programs, CTE programs where they can have apprenticeships and they can get out into the community, whether, you know, and that can work for a lot of different professions, not just teaching, but we certainly, that kind of goes along the same vein as the grow your own. And I also think that growing our paraprofessionals. I think that we've all known paraprofessionals that are amazing, and we've said, man, if that person was only a teacher. And now we have something called the Para Pathways Project that can give them a little kickstart into or toward being a teacher. So I've been trying to encourage our paras to go that route. They can get some of their schooling done for free, and so it kind of gives them a little bit of a running start into a teacher education program. And some of them are opting to actually go that route and become teachers. So I think there's a lot of different creative things that are happening right now. OPI is a big part of that. Our local universities are a part of that. But I think just tapping into those resources, getting the word out on social media. Obviously, you know, we have social media is a big way of getting news out there. So I think just, again, sort of getting those positive stories out there about what's happening in Plains is going to make it, you know, we want people to know those things. We want this to be an attractive place for people to work. So I think that just all of those things would be things that I would try to tap into.
How do you seek out the views of teachers and other school employees?
Few different ways. I think probably the most important way is just having a relationship with them, getting to know the teachers, and I think that once you have sort of that foundation built with them, I think that they feel a lot more free to have those conversations with you. I think you can do it in more formal means too. Sometimes you can send out surveys to staff and it can be anonymous and they can feel free to express themselves without fear of repercussion or any kind of backlash. But I think I would prefer it to be more of an open discussion, because to me that would mean that there's some relational trust there and that they feel like they can talk to you. So I think that I would really love to be, the way I feel I operate is I like to get to know people and say, you know, you can talk to me about those things. I don't know right at this moment, you know, I may not have the solution at the moment, but I'm still interested in knowing, and I want to hear. So that's, I think it's just kind of the good old fashioned asking and listening, but that comes with sort of the foundation of having the relationship first. You can't put the cart before the horse, so to speak. So.
What are some of the major hurdles you see with improvement in instructional programs?
Probably one of the biggest is that big looming specter of budget and money. That's, you know, what anytime you're in a small school district, you know, it's a reality that we have this much to do and we have this much to do it with. So I think that's always a hurdle that we have to negotiate. I think mindset and inertia sometimes are big things too. I think that sometimes we get comfortable and we think, you know what, there's no better way to do it. This has been fine. It's always worked. And sometimes there's a better way. But I think that before you can get to that next step, I think again it's about the relationship and it's about really listening to people and figuring out what that inertia is about, right? Because sometimes it's that we don't have enough information about this. We need more information. Sometimes it's about, I'm scared of change. I don't like it. It freaks me out, right? Sometimes it's about, I don't have the knowledge to do this, and so that scares me. I won't be able to do this. So I think being able to listen to people and find out, what is the source of the resistance or the inertia, whatever you want to call it, is really important, because you're going to address it differently depending on what that is. But I think those are probably the biggest barriers are budget, and then just your human resources, right? Is just that resistance that sometimes you can meet when there's a change. Because let's also be honest, we have a lot of change that happens in education. I taught for 17 years, and I know that there's a new thing that comes along all the time, right? And we've all been through it. If you've been teaching for any amount of time, you know that there's a new curriculum, that there's a new initiative, there's a new thing coming along around the corner. And it's really hard sometimes to weed through that and figure out, like, what is the priority here? Is this something that needs to change? Or is this just the latest thing, right? And I think sometimes teachers do think, and I will say that I've been guilty of it myself at times, like thinking, is this just new, and a new iteration of that thing that we did 5 years ago? So, those are barriers that I think are hard to overcome, but I think that that's where you, as the instructional leader, have to educate yourself, and you have to do some research, and you have to find some good data that really can help you put some, what's the word I'm looking for? That can help you put some education and some validation to that thing that you're trying to implement. Okay, because it's otherwise, if you're just saying this is a thing, let's do this, it's not necessarily going to be met well. So you have to understand, I think, what the source of the resistance is. So.
What is your plan for meeting the needs of both general and special education students in a budget-constrained environment?
I think that, with special education is really difficult in a small community. It really is, because we're expected in small communities to do all the things that the well-funded communities and districts do, and we have not as much resource to do those things. And so it's hard that we have those same expectations, and so we do have to be really creative in how we meet that. I don't know that there's an easy answer to that, except to say that I think we have to be well aware of what special ed law is. We have to know what we are required to do. I think that in terms of meeting the needs, we have to be really clear on communicating our students' needs, whether they're general ed or whether they're special education children. We have to be clear on communicating that to our classroom teachers, and we have to be as supportive as we can in helping them meet those needs. And sometimes that might be a push-in model from our special ed. I know sometimes they call them special ed teachers or case managers. It may be a push-in model where they're supporting in the classroom, and sometimes it may be a combination of them pulling kiddos out at times and then sometimes pushing in. So I've seen those hybrid types of structures before, and they seem to work pretty well. But this isn't an easy question. Like, this is something that we're going to struggle, and we're always going to try to find a better way to do it, because our caseloads of kids that have been identified as kids that require an IEP, that caseload is getting bigger and bigger, it seems like, every year. So we need to continue to find creative ways to meet those needs. And I think a big part of that, too, is just really having some training for our gen ed teachers as well. A big part of that is knowing how to generate and interpret data, because that's the strength a lot of times of our special ed case managers or teachers, is they know data really well, and they know how to take that and use it to drive their instructional decisions. And I think that you know, our gen ed teachers probably need to have all of those skills as well, know how to regulate a student who is dysregulated, right? Because that's a big thing now too, is we have all seen kids in classrooms that need to be regulated because they're just, you know, the behavior issues are really getting to be pretty common in the general ed classroom. So I think it's building up the skills of the gen ed teachers. I think it's continuing to, you know, also just educate our whole staff, honestly, not just the teachers, but our whole staff on what to do with our kiddos that need that need special help. Because sometimes those kids aren't kids that have IEPs either. You know, sometimes our kids need some special help that don't have an IEP. So also just kind of teaching our staff that it's not always that black and white. We do have a lot of kiddos that need special help, but it may not be evident readily. So.
What is your style in confronting negative behavior in employees, students, and community members?
That's a three-pronged question because that's all a little bit different. I'd say probably start from a position of listening. If there is some regulating that needs to happen first, like in the case of a student, I think that has to happen first. I think with a student who comes in and they're just really elevated, the first priority is we got to get them regulated, we've got to get them calm. It might be sitting down for a while, it might be talking and listening to them, you know, just rant or get it all out or whatever. So that's, and I think actually that probably could hold true for adults as well, because sometimes you have parents come in that are very elevated, or there might be a community member that's very elevated over something that they've read or heard or something that's happened. So I think probably the first thing is to just get things to a calm place where you can actually talk, because you can't talk if somebody is elevated. But I think at that point, it becomes a good time to listen. And that's when you really just try to hear what the concern is, what the problem is, and then you go from there. And it becomes, you know, trying to also, I think, read between the lines. Honestly, I think there is a lot of that comes into play, because sometimes what is the presenting issue or concern or the thing that they're angry about may not be the real thing. It might not be the underlying thing. So I think there is a little bit of your own personal judgment that comes into it, and you have to really get to the core message and think, okay, what is the issue here? I think the issue here is that this parent feels that their child is not receiving, that the teacher doesn't like their child, right? Because that's a common one. I have parents come up, the teacher is targeting my student. And frankly, honestly, I've never found that to be the case. But I understand how a parent could feel that way, right? Once you listen to them, you say, okay, I can see where they got that from, but let me bring this to you, okay? Let me show you this, and then let's maybe bring you together with the teacher, and then let's all talk together. So I think that that's probably the way I handle conflict the best, is just by getting everything to a calm place, listening, and then trying to find a way to mend and repair and have parties listen to each other.
You are hired as the new superintendent in a district. You find several staff who have been less than supportive of your appointment and who are only mildly responsive to you personally. What is your response?
Yeah. I think that, you know, depending on the environment, I mean, I've been in places before that were ambivalent about having somebody new, ambivalent to ranging from ambivalent to outwardly hostile. I think I'm trying to think how I did handle that. What do I want to say about that? I think the biggest thing is just not to engage in the negativity. I am not a person who's given to drama. I like to show respect to people no matter what, because I feel like, you know, if they're upset with me and I know I didn't do anything, right, then I know that I'm probably just the person who's getting in the way, right? I'm just the person who happens to be in their line of vision. And I think understanding that and not taking it personally is a pretty big way I deal with things. And I say that about kids too, because I've had high school kids curse me out before, and I don't ever take it personally. You know, it's just, I know that whatever is happening in their life, I'm in their line of vision, and so I know that it's just going to take time and it's going to take patience, and typically I'm very okay with that because it's worked with me. It's worked for me rather, in just about every situation I've been in. I just think the biggest mistake you can make typically is to confront it and say, and make it be adversarial, because I think the minute you do that, you've kind of lost. I think if it becomes something where someone is really disrespectful to you, you can address it. But again, I don't think it has to be adversarial. I think it can just be a conversation. But I find that my greatest rewards I get from relationships are when I can just be a little bit patient and realize that this isn't me. I just sort of walked into this and I got in the way. So I think time and patience and listening and understanding, and then revealing yourself to people too as somebody who is not there to try to impose something on them, but you're just there to try to make things better. I think that takes time, and it takes people learning who you are and trusting you, and yeah, it just takes time and it takes patience. So
You have a principal who does not evaluate teachers as directed by policy. How do you handle that one?
Well, if it's a policy, I would say that it's pretty inarguable at that point in time. I think, though, that probably trying to find out what the source of that resistance is really pretty key too, because I don't think you can just top down people. I don't think you can just say, do this, and expect it to be done the way you would like it to be done. I think that trying to understand, why is this happening? Do you feel like you don't have time to do it? Do you feel like you're not up to the task? I don't know, I mean, I would really have to understand why. And I know that this is going to be a reoccurring theme with me. I'm always seeking to know why something is happening, because I just feel like you can't really address it unless you know why it's happening. And so I think that trying to get to the heart of it and why that resistance is there would probably be my first go-to. But if it's just, I don't want to, then I think it does become about, well, you have to, and this is the job, and this is why you're here. It's to help grow our teachers, and it's to help make the instruction better for the students, and this is necessary. So as much as, yes, absolutely want to try to understand, want to try to meet people where they are, but when it comes to non-compliance, when it's something that has to be done for the good of our students and for the good of the school, then it does become about, at some point, it has to be done. And how can I support?
A board member claims to represent a sizable group in your community, but she seems to be in opposition to most of your recommendations. What would you do?
I think that I would probably invite that board member and maybe that group that they said they're representing to come talk. Because to me, I've sort of experienced this with students as well when they say, everybody in the class feels this way. You know, and so I'm talking to them and they're like, Ms. Smith, well, the teacher does this and the students hate it and everybody feels that way. And then, you know, upon further investigation, I find out that that's not true, that all the students do not in fact feel that way. So I think the first thing to me is, you know, is this credible? Like, is this really a big faction that feels this way? And if so, let's have all of them come and talk to me rather than maybe just having that representative, because it's hard for me to know really how big is that group, you know, unless I can see them and I can talk to them and I can look them in the eye. I think that would probably be one of the ways that I approach it. But I think that if they did come to me and they talked to me, then it would be like everybody else. They would have an audience in me. They would be heard. They would be respected, and we would talk, and we would see if there's any credence to what they're saying. You know, is this something that I need to take into account? Do we need to do something about this? Does this information need to be, disseminated to other people, or not? You know, like how. I think that it just at that point in time, the short of it, sorry, I feel like I'm getting windy here, but I think the short of it is that once you have that information and you see exactly what the source of that is, how big is that group, then you decide, you know, what should I do with this information? And that could go one of many ways. And hopefully I have a lot of people around me too that I can talk to and say, hey, this happened, you know, what do you think? You know, as somebody maybe who's lived here for 20 years, you know, what do you think? What's your thoughts and guidance? So I am not opposed to asking for guidance and help and some direction, and especially since, you know, I'm not a member of the community. I mean, I've certainly been in small communities in Montana for the better part of my life, but I have not lived in Plains, and this is a unique community all its own. So I would definitely want to seek some advice from somebody who knows the community.
What do you feel is the appropriate role of a board member in this district?
I think that the appropriate role, and that's really, it's so multifaceted, I guess. I think it's just to support the district goals and to further those and to be the voice of the school out in the community, to try to find ways to get resources maybe from the community, although I think that's a big part of the superintendent's job as well. But I think basically, if I was to put it just in a very simplistic way, I think it's to support the things that we're trying to do in the school, the district's goals. And that can look a lot of different ways. So I don't mean to make it sound like that's a small job. It's a big job. But that's, if I was to sum it up, I'd say that that's what I see the board's job as.
Many groups of people in the schools and community express a desire to meet and communicate effectively with the superintendent. Is it a constructive use of the superintendent's time to meet with so many people? If important, how do you accomplish this?
I think that, I do think it's a constructive use, because I do think that the superintendent's role is sort of that voice of the school district, and they're that face of the school district. So I think it's really important that the superintendent is out in the community. I think it's important that they live in the community, and that they get out and they know the community well. So I do think it's important. In terms of how to accomplish that, I mean, if it turns out that this is, you know, there's so many people that want to talk and meet with you, then I would say maybe putting something in place, you know, town meetings, you know, things like that you can get those conversations and that face time with the public accomplished in a fairly efficient way is probably something that could be implemented, or something less formal. I mean, maybe there are little get-togethers that you can have in the school, ice cream socials and things like that the community can be invited into, and then you can have some opportunity to talk to people then. But I think that you can always structure those moments and those times where you can invite the community in to talk and to meet with you and to express their concerns. But I think it's also really important to just have an open door policy. I think that if there's somebody who wants to call you or email you, they should feel free to do that. I mean, this is a small town, and if we would have to deal with a lot of bureaucracy, then I don't think it would be, I think it would be sort of antithetical of a small town culture to have a lot of bureaucratic red tape to cut through just to be able to talk to a superintendent. So I think being able to just reach out to them if you need to is important, and just have that open door policy. So.
What do you feel is the superintendent's role in the process of articulating the district vision and mission and setting district goals?
I think that the superintendent's role in that is, when it comes to the goal setting, I think that a really important role of the superintendent is taking a look at the district as a whole and taking a look at data. Whether it's test scores, whether it's a survey that has been done on school climate that maybe the students have had to complete, but it's using that data that you get from different sources and really figuring out, I think with the administrative team and with staff as well, I don't think it's necessarily something that is all just done in a vacuum, but I think that it's their job to sort of fine-tune that and to say, this is from everything I'm seeing, everything I'm hearing, this has to be one of our big priorities. And then bringing that to staff and having staff take a look at that and really give their input, having the community give their input. So I think that going with an idea of what that is important, but I think getting the language really clarified, getting the goal really clarified is important once you talk to all the different stakeholders, talking to the board and how they're going to contribute that, I think then that the superintendent becomes the person who is sort of the gatekeeper. And so all of the things that the district decides is its goal. And this is a process, believe me, this isn't anything that happens just quickly, because there is a whole process of trying to have buy-in from everybody, from all the stakeholders. But once you have those goals identified, I think the superintendent's role really does shift to being the person who is making some decisions, and some really hard decisions sometimes, about how to spend money, what kind of professional development to bring to the staff, and how to be a good steward of the money and the resources, and how to help the district meet that goal. Okay, so I think that that's a huge role of the superintendent. And in terms of articulating it, I think that that's every day. I think every time the superintendent is in the building, every time the superintendent is out in the community, I think there's an opportunity there to articulate the vision in a lot of different ways. So if the vision has to do with student achievement, then I think that that's what's communicated every time you go out in the public. And I think that those are where you funnel all your resources, is towards student achievement. So I think that is the role of the superintendent. I see that as being the biggest role.
What type of relationship do you want to establish with the board?
My hope would be that I would have a very collaborative relationship with the board. I have been in school districts before where the relationship with the board has been very adversarial at times, and it's not a good feeling. And I think even more than that, it feels like things don't get accomplished because there's so much conflict that it just never really moves anywhere. So my hope would be that we can listen to each other, we can hear each other, we can be aligned in our mission and our goals, and that we can work together to make those things happen. That would be an ideal situation.
Give us examples of the best ways you have found to communicate with the majority of the residents in your last district. Would you foresee any changes with a district of this size?
I think that honestly, the best way that I've found to communicate with people, in my current role at Stevensville, I've had a few different hats. So I've been an assistant principal. I was an athletic director for 2 years there, in addition to being an assistant principal. And then this year, I am a transportation supervisor, but I'm not an activities director anymore. So I'm not actually in 3 roles, although our AD did quit, so now I am actually temporarily in 3 roles. So there's that. But what I have, the best way I've found is when you connect over the kids. And so whether it's, because you're talking to a parent because maybe something has happened with their child at school, good or bad, when you're talking with a parent and you're teaming together and you're collaborating, you're thinking, how can we best bring support to your child for their success? That is a really good way that I've communicated with parents. On a larger scale, as an AD, having to attend all the functions, I have made so many connections with people in the community, and not just parents. It's been just community members that are interested in furthering the programs and the athletics, and I've made countless connections that way. So I think my best answer for that is anytime you can find an opportunity to connect with people in the community over what's happening with the kids, it's this really great foundation, and it's a really positive foundation. And plus, it sends a message too. It's that visibility thing. It's you're here, you care about our kids, you're doing your best to make these programs happen, help my child succeed. So those are the ways that I've probably found most successfully, and they're pretty organic. I don't know that I have to even look for more ways to connect because I feel like I meet so many parents and so many community members just in those ways. If I did need to, step that up and say, okay, I need to get out there more, there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, especially if you live in a small town, you're going to be visible if you get out into the community and you talk to people and you're open to having people talk to you. So I think I would just seize any of those opportunities that I could, because I think it's really important that the community knows that you're there and that you're approachable.
Tell us why you feel you're the best candidate for this position.
I think that one of the things that is probably on my resume, but probably wasn't in my bio, so, you hear me? Okay, sorry, I thought that disappeared for a minute. Wasn't in my bio. I grew up in a small town, as I mentioned, but I think, one of the things, after I got my undergrad in elementary education, I went and lived in the Washington, D.C. area for 16 years. And that was a huge learning experience for me, because being a very small town Montana girl and not being around a lot of diversity, I was pretty clunky in that environment, and I had a lot to learn. And I think that it was probably one of the greatest learning experiences of my life. I think just being able to be around a lot of different kind of people from different backgrounds, different races, different cultures, it taught me so much. And when I came back to Montana, I came back in 2007, and don't ever want to leave because I love Montana. Made me appreciate Montana a lot. But I think I bring that sort of a little bit more of a well-rounded viewpoint than maybe I would have had I not gone there. I think that I'm bringing a little more of an idea of what's out there in the world, and that maybe if our students venture out there, you know, what they might encounter, what's going on out in the world. Not to say I know it all, because I don't, but I do think that I got a little bit of an education there that was valuable. I think the other thing that I bring is that I wore a lot of hats. Working at Stevensville has been an amazing learning experience for me, because I've dealt in transportation, athletics, all the things that an assistant principal does, like discipline and attendance. I've just been able to, I feel really fortunate, like I've been able to wear a lot of hats and learn a lot. So I think that there's that aspect of it. And probably the last thing that I think I bring that maybe, you know, the others do not, is that I was able to work in the teacher education program. And so I was able to develop that link and knowing how to reach out to the university and what the program is at U of M and at MSU, what those teacher education programs consist of, and just having that link to higher education, because we need that too, because we need to be able to secure the sort of that pipeline of teachers that we're going to hopefully be getting. So I think that there are some different things that I bring to the table that could be valuable, but keep on feeling like I lose this, sorry. So yeah, I would say those are probably some things that would make me a good candidate.
Do you have any questions for us?
I do. Yes, I do. I'm not going to ask them all, or else we'll be here all night, but all right, I'm gonna pick and choose here. All right, well, so I'm gonna start out with this one. What would you all say is Plain School District's biggest source of pride?
Historically, athletics have always been huge here. There's a lot of push to help us expand out of that, and I'm excited about that. But I would say historically, people show up, we black and orange. So people come out for athletics frequently.
I do know that is a big part of small school districts, right? Because it's a big source of identity. You know, whatever that the athletics are, that is a big significant source of pride and identity. So that's what I find in most small school districts. So
You find a lot of people who graduated from here, they're still going to the sporting events. I mean,
Yes.
that is a big source of pride.
good.
Carries on generation to generation.
Love it.
I think also there's a sense of pride in having a small community where when you go to the grocery store, you know the people in the grocery store, you know the people in the drugstore, everybody that you interact with at the hospital, the school, are people who know one another, and that when people struggle, people in this town step up and they help one another, and there's a sense of pride in the fact that we're a close-knit community who cares about each other.
Definitely, being part of the alumni, I feel, well, you just see it in the expression when you, as an observer, and me not from being from here, put me at a disadvantage in a lot of ways. And one thing that has been brought to my attention is the pride in what our community has with its alumni and the people that come from here, which I can completely respect that, and I admire it. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? I don't wanna put anyone on the spot, but I also don't wanna cut anybody off by asking another question, so.
Ask away.
Okay. What, as a board, what are you hoping that your next superintendent will see as priority number one?
I'm gonna go with communication.
Yeah, communication, and I think, equally holding everyone accountable to their job, that's important. Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of missing, so.
Personally, I have a two-pronged priority. One is fiscal management, and the other is creating an environment in the school where staff and the teachers are inspired to follow your vision.
Are inspired to say.
Follow your vision,
Oh, follow
and
vision.
that everybody is working in a collaborative environment.
Anyone else? Thank you. Okay, here's one. How supportive has the community historically been of tax levies and bonds?
Yeah, that's
Not
probably
very.
going
Do we want to skip to the next question?
The long
Ask
answer
and
is
answer.
probably not gonna happen. It'll take a long time to get stakeholders to
Well, our last
participate.
one was what, 2010?
Maybe 2010, yeah.
For the
Mhm.
meters?
Yeah, for technology,
Exactly, thank you.
yeah,
2010.
for technology
Yeah, that was
levy,
our last one.
yeah. We'll work really hard not to let that one go, cause it probably won't get voted. Again, just keep her going.
I do think there's some room for us to do a better job of advertising the need for levies and getting the community involved, and perhaps the students as our, as people who go out and speak to the community about what kinds of things the school brings to them. I think it's not impossible, but I think we really have to put a great deal of effort into a levy, because taxpayers in this part of the world are not,
We're not
open to it.
No, we needed, one thing I noticed when I got on the board, and you got on the board at the same time, when we had that meeting, there was the whole thing about the levy at the exact same time. There was a lot of misinformation where some folks were coming in. Cause you get the people that have paid their dues and live in the community, and they're older, and they don't really get involved with the school anymore. So some of them are like, I don't wanna pay more taxes. You see both sides of it. But there was a lot of uneducated parts of it where the taxable value of your house, some of the folks saw their places worth is, is $1.2 to $3 million, but that's not the same amount of taxable value. I got to see a lot of folks get really confused thinking that their houses were, according to them, appraised for $2 million, that they thought that was the taxable and they were just gonna get taxed on their house, which is weird.
It is a big fear. And I think also important to note, over the last year, we've had some information come out. Not only was Plains identified as the poorest town in Montana, but MSN also identified us as the poorest town in the United States, just recently. So that's big.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's gonna be a big deal about asking people for more money.
Yes.
Where did they base that on?
Median income, based on the median income. Yeah, and I think it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago that they posted that. It was very interesting to read.
I can tell you one thing I've noticed though is we're having a flux of people moving here from out of joint counties that I do know. I've got a lot of people from Kalispell that are tired of paying 3 times as much as they do in the compliance. So.
But there are real issues here.
Well,
Well-
I think to expand on Colleen's point is the education of what it's for. I think there's a lot of distrust, when it comes to asking people for money, and understanding that it's gonna be utilized appropriately, and what that serves, and how do our children benefit from this. I think awareness is a big part of that.
That kind of goes back to that communication thing that you were talking about. Yeah, for sure. I think that communication has to go, it has to be really transparent, and it has to be frequent, and it has to be timely.
Well, for us, more active involved, especially when we have kids here and we're an active participant, we can see the value, we understand the value, we're orchestrating the value. For those that are, occasional or non-attendees, it's very hard to get that point across. So it's education.
Finding those places. places that you can maybe reach all the people and educate them, not just the people that have the students and have already know. Yeah, I knew that would be a little bit of a loaded question because in just about every rural school district, you know, they're experiencing the same things, so, I get it. Let's see. I did wanna ask this, Plains, are they going to be, subscribing or using the Bridge Health Alliance that is adopted, that has been adopted? Yes, raising it, okay. I was just wondering about that because I know that's a big source of conversation right now is.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Plains is one of the districts we
Yeah,
know
we
about.
Oh,
have
yes,
the
this is
quotes.
for the
We're
statewide
signed
measure.
up.
Oh, yeah, that's a great thing. I
Okay.
should remember what it was called.
Yeah.
It should raise.
No, sorry, lower cost.
Oh, I was like, it should
lower
raise
costs.
costs.
No.
No.
Raise
raise
benefit,
lower
raise
costs.
benefit, lower
3%
cost.
less this year.
Medical insurance is horrible, and so
Yeah.
yes, that is something, yeah. we
Okay,
are seeing that.
I was wondering about that because I know that a big thing that teachers talk about, well, and I won't even just say teachers, administrators too, is, you know, when they get those raises, it can be really offset by the rising cost of insurance, so,
Yeah.
so that's good, hopefully we'll see some good things with that. I think that's kind of, I do have one more question. I did see in a board agenda that one of the items was restructuring, or the possible restructuring of the administration, and I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so, we're gonna have a meeting on the sixth, so that all the community come in to talk about all the things the board is considering. We're looking at future budgets, not just next year, but a few years out, looking at what can we sustain. We've been watching the trends in enrollment the last couple of years. We're on the cusp, we don't need 2 full admin, but having 1 admin is not going to be appropriate. We did, a workshop where a lot of stakeholders came in and we talked about, viability and whether or not it would work and cost. And one of the things that was identified as the most palatable might be, having a 1.5 principal. We are not able to restructure our soup because we have too many FTEs. So it's a conversation, it's not something we voted on yet, but it did seem, everyone thought that that would be the most palatable to the community, when looking at budget constraints. And it's been a consistent question asked of us, if we're going to be looking at staffing and extracurriculars, why are we not also looking at admin? And we wanna look at all of it. So, we want a lot of community participation to give us feedback to know what works.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I think those are all the questions I have, so thank you very, very much. I appreciate all your time, and thank you to everybody who came.
Thanks, Danny.